Dear Diary, it's your good friend Chernobyl. I have excellent news. They're making a movie about me. Only bad thing is, it is a horrible, horrible horror movie that they originally wanted to do found footage from the same people that brought us Paranormal Activity. The only problem is, they changed mind and make a regular movie without really fixing any of the mistakes. So now my movie is horrible. Worst off, now that the movie's horrible, there'll be thousands of YouTubers making videos with horrible stereotypical Russian accent. And I'm Ukrainian. What a bad day. Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Chernobyl Diaries. Yeah, Chernobyl Diaries, you could tell this movie, it's a mess. It's a mess, and you're sad because you could tell this movie had potential. This is one of those that you're like, oh, you came so close. You almost did it. You almost made a decent, really good horror movie. But then you fucked it up. You could tell there was some really good passion. They have found a really good setting for a horror film. I mean, Pripyat is probably one of the spookiest places you could probably imagine to set a horror movie in. I can only think of one other place that's like it, and it's this abandoned industrial city off of Japan. It's on this one island. The place is like completely abandoned. But of course, Pripyat's a little scarier because it has fucking radiation. So we have this film. It's got, your group of Americans. They're traveling through Europe, and then they stop in to Kiev to visit one of the characters' brother, who happens to live. It's been living in Kiev for the past couple of years. Why they had to trape through the rest of Europe, I have no idea. The excuse, your brother lives in Ukraine. We're gonna go visit him. I can buy that. I guess they thought that was people who know someone that moves to the Ukraine. I know people that moved. I went to school with Lithuanians. I know people from Kazakhstan, from Almaty. So it doesn't seem weird to me. But then again, I don't think that many people know people from former Soviet Union. So there you go. Anyway. It's kind of stuff like that, though, which was the problem. It's one of those films where you start to think they answered some stuff really good, but other stuff, you're just going, wait, why did they do that? And that's the big problem with this film. That, and the biggest problem is, I think, with the setting and pacing and all that stuff is, you could tell this film was originally designed to be a found footage film. And somewhere along the lines, probably later in development, they changed it from being a found footage film to being a traditionally shot horror movie, and they didn't really change the script. The way it's shot, they do kind of shoot a lot of the scenes in this like kind of documentary style, where there's obviously the camera's following around. There's a little bit of shake to the camera, almost as if it's like somebody's following them around. So it's still shot a bit like a found footage film, but it's still traditional, and therefore a lot of the elements of a found footage film that work for a found footage film don't translate well. A lot of the pointless character moments feel really out of place because they're how should I put this? They're the pointless scenes that you expect in a found footage film because it's meant to make the footage feel more real, like this is actually somebody's camera. And of course they're going to film stuff that doesn't have to do with anything else because it's just somebody's recording. So somebody's out on vacation, and of course they're going to have some random incident where they film when they run into a group of drunk Ukrainians, and like they're maybe gonna start a fight or try to attack the girls they're with, but it just boils down. That whole scene, there is an entire scene where they get out of a bar, they run into some punks, thugs, and they kind of talk them down, and they just kind of go off their ways. And I thought it was supposed to really establish that the one character who has been living in Kiev speaks decent Ukrainian. but that never comes back, and and it comes back in the worst way. I'm going to give some spoiler. There's a spoiler warning right now. So be warned. I think you got my initial impression. It's not really a great recommend here. Hardcore fans, okay. Everyone else, you might want to see something else. But this character, so he gets shot at the end by Ukrainian security forces, and he's coming out. He's got like all radiation sickness. And his eyes have been like burned, and he's going, "Help! Please help us! Please help us!" And the Ukrainians are shouting in Ukrainian, "Stop! Do not come any closer! Get on the ground!" All that stuff in Ukrainian. And I thought for sure this is going to be a scene where they'll establish, oh, okay, now he'll come useful where he can speak Ukrainian. He'll stop, be able to tell the girl, no, they're telling us to stop. We shouldn't do this. No, instead he just continues to charge forward, going, "Help us, please! Please help us!" Not even shouting in Ukrainian, "Help us," or Russian, whatever. No, Ukrainian. That would have been speaking of Russian, that would have maybe made an interesting plot point. He shouts off in Ukrainian, and he's like, or the girl goes, "Well, why don't you speak with them in Ukrainian?" He's like, "They're not speaking Ukrainian. I think that's Russian." Add a little conspiracy element to it. That might have been a little cooler. But again, we had this then pointless scene that was probably meant just to be a pointless scene to make the footage seem more real. But they never fixed it when they transitioned from found footage to traditional style film. The other big problem with the film comes at the end. Actually, a lot of the film, outside of those kind of how they shot it and how they set up scenes, especially when they're in the van, you could tell that van, a lot of the things that were in the van were really not changed at all from how they had probably designed it as a found footage film. For one thing, most of the characters have cameras, and they're recording everything when they're in the van and walking around Chernobyl. And of course, which is alright, but the way they shot it was a little too much like found footage. And I think some of the horror elements might have been lost when they're like under siege by these big ass dogs in this little van. It was still shot as if it was like footage. But I think the biggest problem with this is the ending makes you very confused, because I think their big problem with this, and the big problem with doing Chernobyl is, yes, it's well known. Priept and the whole city, everybody knows about it, so therefore it's a good setting. People are very familiar with it. The problem is it's also a very well known site, and therefore it's well documented site. So you're left with a lot of things you want to do. Like, for example, again, this is a major spoiler, but the creatures are basically hobo radiation zombies. I don't know. It's ever well explained. That are living in the Chernobyl ruins, and they're like attacking people. Now that might have been fine for a film that came out in the early 90s when Chernobyl was still relatively new, and people weren't visiting there all the time. But it's 20-25 years. Chernobyl is widely visited. It's heavily monitored. It's not that hard to actually. If I went to Ukraine right now, I could get to Chernobyl extremely easily. Not maybe the plant, but at least Pripyat. I could get there no problem. You can get in. I mean, I think a lot of people just kind of drive into the city nowadays. I don't think it's even that highly secured. Or if it's not, I don't know the details, or if it's not, you just apply for a permit and the government kind of lets you in. Say, why do you want to go? Well, I want to take pictures. Okay, you can go. So you're stuck with this incident. Well, why, if it's such a bad place and there's these zombie creatures, are nobody, how come no one's ever heard of this? You can't say the government's keeping a lid on it because they let civilians in there all the time. So they decided to backtrack a bit on that. And at the end, they kind of get through. They survive. The two characters survive an attack. Actually, they have one of the most anticlimactic fights. Is eventually two of the inhabitants, shall we call them, attack them, and they both, with their bare fist, beat the radiation zombie inhabitants, whatever they are. They beat them with their fists, and they win. And then they go on, because there's more, of course, but one that completely destroys what they are, threat-wise, because earlier in the film you see stuff like there's guards bodies that are dead, and you see like one area that apparently was the last stand of one of the security guards. He's wasting with AK-47 rounds, blowing out everywhere. And if you're thinking, if you can beat these guys with your bare fists after being exhausted and suffering radiation poisoning, how the fuck did these guys overcome guards? I mean, bullet hurt more than gun, so... I mean, bullet hurt more than punch. This should not be a problem. The guards, okay, maybe one or two might have got killed, but why the rest? Why weren't the guards able to easily handle this? And the way they saw this is after they kind of escape this last scenario, is they come across a security group, or a security team that looks like they're preparing to sweep the city. They've got armored vehicles, they're in full gear, there's squads in them. That's where you had the situation where the one guy that should be able to talk his way out gets shot, doesn't even speak a word of Ukrainian, and they take the girl. And as they take her into this hospital, you overhear dialogue, and they subtitle this. Do we get all the patients? Yes, only one escaped. We're clearing out the ruins and stuff, implying that there's some sort of cleanup operation going underway. And then they pick her up and they throw her in a locked room. And as they close the door, it's revealed there's a ton of these zombie things in there. And you're just going, wait a minute. Scratching your head going, no movie. No, this is bringing up questions, and I think that's what they wanted to do. They're like, ooh, what was that? Like, ooh, let's debate this type of scenario. But this movie didn't earn that. This movie needed an actual explanation and not leave loose ends. There's some horror movies that can do that can leave loose ends and go, wow, I wonder how this all worked out. What was going on there? No, this film didn't earn that intrigue to be able to do that. They needed actually at the end to explain it. And that's why you're left really scratching your head at the end. Like, okay, are they inhabitants or are they patients of some sort of Ukrainian experiment? Are you a Ukrainian government experiment or a Russian government experiment? And that would have really worked for this film. As like kind of an explanation for what's going on. Like, the government's doing some sort of illegal tests on its citizens, and they were hiding it in Chernobyl, and let's say this group of people just escaped from the underground lab there, and they've kind of gone crazy. Which would explain why all of a sudden there's problems now in Chernobyl, and B, would have thrown you in at least a somewhat different direction. Or they could have done it, I think they would have been better to just have a complete monster. Like, it was just some freak mutation creature that happened. So there's like only one of them. It's almost like a Bigfoot type setup. That would have been a little bit more interesting. And this has an aversion to light, so it stays out in the woods or something. That would have been a little bit more interesting, especially with the way they set it up. You would think, they were making me think it was crazy hobos stuck in Chernobyl. No. It was really this big mutant monster. Because they kind of established like there's like mutant fish and stuff in the water. So the idea of going, there's a bigger mutation. That's just kind of a giant monster creature thing. That's what's wrecking and killing everybody. And that would have even explained, like, when they were actually exploring Chernobyl, they run into a fucking bear in the middle of in the middle of one of the small apartments, and it freaks everybody out, obviously, because you just ran across a bear. But it could have then served as an explanation, going, this is why the animals were coming into the city during the daytime. Is apparently this creature was walking around the surrounding woodlands, and it kind of was forcing the animals in, like the animals are kind of running away from it. That would have been a more interesting explanation. It would at least gave a better reason, because you could have confronted them and then they could have said, we captured the creature, or you could have had a scenario set up at the end where it looks like the creature's about to kill the last survivor, and all of a sudden Ukrainian troops show up and shoot him. The other way I wish they ended this movie, actually, was they kept on having a radiation detector, and they constantly ignored the radiation detector. Every time it started beeping, going like, fuck, run away, this is bad, you're dying. I thought they were setting this movie up for this, where they kind of make it seem like the last couple survivors are the sole survivor escape. They made it to safety, everything's great, the Ukrainians come to save them, and then it goes, oh, what? You have a lethal dose of radiation. You're going to be dead in 2 days. What? But, well, you have a radiation detector. Surely you realized you had to run or not go into these radioactive areas. That would have been awesome. That would have been a nice little twist, because you would have seen constantly throughout the movie them ignoring the radiation, and you would have went, at least I would have went, oh, okay. Because they always do that in movies where they ignore the radiation, they don't suffer any consequences. Now, they do this later on in the film. They wind up, the last two people wind up in the Chernobyl reactor itself, and they start suffering radiation poisoning. The one guy has his eyes, they start burning, their skin starts blistering up. So at least it shows, like, oh, radiation can fuck you up. At least they do that. Is there anything else to touch on? Oh yeah, the characters a bit. I like the Russian tour guide, because they do this in a way, I'm not sure, Russian or Ukrainian, whatever he's supposed to be. They set him up, and normally in a movie like this, you set up the tour guide to be running a completely sham operation. It's completely illegitimate. This one, they made at least some effort to make it that this guy was running a legitimate operation, that he had actually been taking these tours out to Chernobyl completely legally for 5 years, and this time, as he approaches the checkpoint to let people in, which normally he just goes up, talk, and they just wave him through, they're saying, no, we're not letting anyone in. You can tell by the character he's really confused by this. And because his customers then start really bitching, he decides to take them through a back way that he knows of. So they set it up. I mean, even to the point where even after he's gone in illegally, technically, and like he gets back to his car and the engine's been kind of torn up, even he at that point kind of goes, well, fuck it, this is serious. He starts getting on his radio trying to call in for backup, and what it sounds like he's trying to call the actual government frequency. So they kind of averted that old trope where, it's the tour guide, he's hiding the fact that none of this was legit. They probably could have gotten out a lot earlier had they bothered calling in, but no, he actually does this, and as soon as there's an actual problem, he goes, well, shit, this is an actual problem, it's time to call in the security forces to come in and, pick us up. I guess I'll have to pay a fine or something. And unfortunately, he kind of is one of the first to go. I actually like the character. He was a rather funny character. He seemed to get what was going on, or at least was suspicious. Like something weird was going on and unusual. The other characters, surprisingly, outside of the Americans, they had one of the Americans that we're first introduced to is, the straight. I don't know about straight. Ignore that. Bad terminology. The brother and his girlfriend, and the brother is the cautious one. Sticks to the plan, doesn't get in any trouble type. And the other brother that's living in Ukraine is the one that's kind of always doing the crazy stuff. And then, of course, they bring their friend who just got out of a relationship. Which in modern horror movies means she'll survive. It's the people in relationships that always get fucked up. Inverse of the 80s. Let's see here. And, of course, they also have, joining them, a Australian hippie and his Norwegian lover. Or Norwegian... his Viking, as he calls her. Ironically, the Australian hippie is probably one of the better characters in this. As in, like, he's like one of the people you'd want to have around if you were gonna survive. Like, he actually has his head on straight and thinking of like, okay, it's 12 miles. We're just gonna hike on straight through, march it, get to the security checkpoint. They'll come back and help the people that have hurt legs and stuff. Like, he's the most rational character there is, and it's everyone else that's acting crazy and stupid. Like, even when the other characters are acting crazy and stupid, they're like, oh, wow. Why do we have to do this? His girlfriend's like, why are we sticking with him? It's like, they're the only people with the gun. The crazy. Yeah, after the one character's brother disappears, they go, yeah, what? They're kind of go. His girlfriend goes to him, why are they still with him? And he goes like, he still has the gun. Yeah, there's implying there's obviously crazy stuff going on. I'm not leaving without the gun. And he does a couple other things like that, where he's actually the more rational person about hunting down and surviving. So, of course, it sucks when he goes. Because you kind of knew going into this, if you're not an American character, you're probably going to die. Oh, well. I think I've talked enough about this one. You got my impression. This was a missed opportunity. A lot of the shots and a lot of the scares were set up quite well. It just really needed an explanation. Some movies can get away with that and not explain stuff. Chernobyl Diaries, not so much. Not so much. And, of course, they also needed to take time and readjust this from being a, found footage movie to traditional. They needed to make more changes to set that up better. They should have just either kept it a found footage movie, but a lot of the stuff later on in the movie would have been like, why are they still recording? Problems. So I could see why they made the switch, but we'll see. Well, signing off for now. Catch you guys later.